All right. Oh, three of you with a thumbs up already. Here I am. And as you can see, I've got my most fashionable items of clothing. You'd think this is a torn jumper that I use to work, but no, it's the princely fashion that I'm going to instill. And I'm having an espresso, which, well, to be fair, I don't know if you can see this on the camera. You see that layer of sugar there? That's because the rest of the sugar has actually dissolved. It's about there, the level of sugar in my coffee. I like to take some coffee with my sugar. I'm not a regular coffee drinker, as you can probably tell, otherwise I'd be dead. But when I do drink an espresso, I take a sugar jar and I pour it in there, and then that's about it. Oh, nationalist. I think it's been a while since we saw you. Interesting topic. We'll watch Reply tomorrow while at work. Family day today. Hail Kurgan. Oh, indeed, family day it is. My family, actually my wife, heroically this morning, let me sleep in till about almost 11, I think. I was like, that's true love. And then she's taken the kids, she started spring cleaning, which is driving me fucking insane. I mean, it needs to be done, I get it, but she just gets these random days when it's like, look, we've got other stuff to do. But I just kept quiet, let her do her thing, and then she's taken all the kids and decided to go to the park with them so that I could do a bit of live streaming and some of the other stuff that I've been busy with. So, yes, to her, I salute her efforts. Department of Transportation says, are you not sweet enough? No, I'm not sweet enough. I'm a very, very bitter man. That's why I need a lot of sugar in my coffee. So, good evening from the Philippines. Hello, Maxis. Yeah. Well, a bit of news, various different news, and then we'll get onto the Maxwellian equations and anti-gravity technology and stuff like that. But first, just a couple of other funny bits. So, those of you that follow the blog, it's actually in the notes for the video, the link. You might know that I've decided to give a real go this year at pruning the trees. And I had Sylvester here. We did about, I reckon we might have hit 120. I've done some more yesterday. There's a lot more trees to be done, but certainly the first 50 I've labeled them with numbers and everything, and they're marked up. They've got an age. There's a whole schedule for them. And what I've done is I thought, well, some people might be interested in it. Is if you want to sponsor a tree, you go to the link there on my blog. That's a sticky post at the top of the blog, so you can click on there. You get to see the tree. You can pick the tree because each tree has got a photograph. You can pick it and sponsor it for like from 1 to 3 years, and the range in price I think from is it 10 euro to like it's less per year. It's like 10 euro a year or something, depending on the age of the tree. It goes from about 10 to 48, I think, euro for like 3 years of sponsorship. And you can name the tree. Notice the chic clothing of farming. This is farmer chic, by the way, in case you're wondering. So you can name the tree after, hopefully, a Catholic saint, but you can name it pretty much under whatever you want. You know, your Aunt Gertrude, as long as it's not rude or, clearly out of bounds. And I had a couple of guys, like, very generously right away sponsored 3 for 3 years, one for Saint Possenti, one for Saint Athanasius. And what I said I would do is I would say a Hail Mary for whoever sponsors the trees. And if it's a Catholic saint that they sponsor, I would also say a Hail Mary for that saint. But unexpectedly, guess who went and sponsored the tree for a couple of years? An anonymous gamma. Now, he wanted to remain anonymous, so I'm not going to say who he is, but let's just say I'm absolutely sure he's a Reddit gamma. And he sponsored it under a name, which, maybe the name of somebody he cares about or whatever. And I just thought it was quite funny because he jumped on it right away. And he's one of the first people to sponsor a tree. And he actually sent me a message. He was saying, "What, you're going to pray for me and, pray for and do a mass as well for all the people that sponsored?" And I said, "Yeah, well, that's definitely worth at least 18 euro." And so he sponsored it. So the gammas are actually putting all the hardcore Catholics a little bit to shame here. I don't know how to deal with that really, but I'm sure that the gammas will be all very happy. And in fact, since the gammas are, of course, our sworn enemies, as you know, I had the gamma in chief on the stream before, and I did a 3-day AMA with them and whatever. So I'm not too phased by the gammas or whatever, but I find them quite funny sometimes. And so I thought, just because of that, I actually said a Hail Mary prayer for all the gammas. May their errors be healed, and may good fortune and peace come to all of them. And I mean that. I genuinely mean that. I think, we're told to pray for our enemies. I don't even really think of the gammas as my enemies. They're just there, ankle biting type. That's what they do, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, that was quite funny because I've now got gammas, if you're listening. This is just for you. I've now got gammas as pay pigs. I think, come on, that's just, and I didn't even think of that. It was one of the guys on Social Galactic, J-Dog, that says, you could almost call him a pay pig. So I've got a gamma pay pig. It's hilarious. Department of Transportation says the gamma spurger is quite amusing. They can be quite funny. It was a long while ago, but there's a guy, I think, he'd made like I guess Photoshopped images of like action figures, and I think they did one for Vox and whoever, but they did one of me, and it was like the Kurgan, and it had like a little face on Mars and like telepathy thing or something. It was quite funny. I don't know where that picture. I've saved it though. I took a screenshot of that. Somebody sent it to me, or that's right, somebody sent it to me. So I think I have the photograph somewhere, and I thought it was hilarious. So it was quite funny. But yeah, so that was fun. Another thing that I don't know. I want to tell you guys about this book because look, it's, as some of you know, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. That's been the way I've lived since I was a very young teenager. In fact, I came up with that, and that it's a popular saying now, but when I was a little kid, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, something like that, in Africa, I certainly had not come across that before. And like some people, my friends, had said, you're kind of paranoid. And I was like, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And then it became a very, almost a meme sort of thing. So this book is sort of for the more paranoid amongst you. It's called Metalworking Shop from Scrap. So there it is. It's quite expensive. I think it's $75, but then there was shipping out here, which made it even more expensive. I think, I don't know if you can read it there. It's too much light, but anyway, it's $75 plus shipping, whatever. So it works out to $100 or more, depending where you are. But in here, it basically tells you how to go from like basic tools like this, So you got like a hammer and chisel, that sort of stuff, basic stuff, and how to build your own little forge, and then how to build your own molds and so on, to basically build yourself. And it gives you all the plans and everything to build like a lathe, and he's got various machines like that you cast the metal parts to build. And of course, then you use those machines to build better engineered versions of them or whatever. Anyway, it's the kind of like post-apocalypse type of book that you want to have if you know, if the nukes really reduce everything to sort of a radioactive wasteland and you're still alive. It's a very useful book to have. And or you know, if you're just out there on a farm and you've got basic tools but you don't have a lot of money, you can literally build yourself working machines that will then build other machines. I was trying to see if there's a simple table of so yeah, I'm trying to look for the table of contents, but it doesn't look like it's got it. Ah yeah, here it is. That's right at the beginning. So he's got the charcoal foundry, so it shows you how to create a little foundry, the metal lathe, the metal shaper, the milling machine, the drill press, the dividing head, and the sheet metal brake. So these are 7 machines that you can build just from scratch that will essentially allow you to build any other machine, and then you can use those machines to build better versions of the very same machines, and you know, right down to, you know, if one guy on his own, I think, could, if that's all he was busy doing, you could probably build all of them within, let's say, a year, and then probably build better ones possibly even within that year of the same machines with the ones that is built. So it's mighty bear. But can you make a suit of armor? I don't even need the book for that. You know, I've got like a very hefty little mallet, a metal hammer, and pliers and drills and stuff. I can build armor. I'm sure I can build armor. It won't look pretty, but you know, it'll do the job. And in fact, you don't even really want metal. There's guys on YouTube that'll show you how to build like level 3 sort of bulletproof armor that like you can do for like $30. So oh, Department of Transportation says he has it as a PDF. I actually went out and bought the hardcover book because again, you see, you guys are just not thinking. I mean, when the nukes land and EMPs knock every electronic bit out, I can still read, you see? Well, you and your PDF and your Kindle, you're done. You're done. And that's why I would be a warlord if the nuclear war ever happens and doesn't land one, you know, close enough to wipe me out. Exactly. So if the power goes out, he's out of luck. So then, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, the main topic was anti-gravity technology. Now, I wrote a relatively decent blog post. It's one of the last ones I wrote. Well, I wrote one about the Maxwell equations, and then somebody prompted me, well, let's say on Social Galactic, there's a guy who fancies himself a scientist or an inventor who did the same thing. For those of you who are Social Galactic and know that little feud I had with the fake Catholic deacon, you know, they're like, oh, this is great, and here's how I can help. And they just throw something in there that's total bullshit. It's got nothing to do with what you're talking about and tries to divert from what you're saying. Now, and he did this repeatedly. Now, as Uncle John's band, the guy on Social Galactic, who also has a decent blog, and he's really awesome. He always posts amazing paintings, beautiful stuff. And I made a blog post a little while ago about the unbearable weight of stupid people or whatever. And he made a comment that's like, single data point pattern recognition. It's enough to trigger people. And what he meant by that is that, you know, if you're smart enough, intelligent enough, or have experience enough in a certain topic or whatever, all you need is for one data point to recognize a whole pattern behind it. And this applies a lot to human beings. That I, you know, it's happened a couple of times with like my wife. She will meet somebody or whatever, and she'll be like, "Oh, they seem all right," and I'm like, "No." She's like, but why? You know, they seemed okay. And I'm like, "Oh, well, this and this and this and this." And she's like, "But how can you even like say that?" And it's like, well, you know, it's just the way they speak and certain things they've done. And sometimes it's difficult to articulate exactly how I notice the pattern, because some of it is unconscious just from years of experience, like dealing with microcues for hypnosis and just generally working in an environment where life and death got decided by, whether you spotted certain things or not, because I worked close protection for a few years and in dangerous scenarios and so on. But the point is that I could notice that just from, at best, this guy is inept, inaccurate, and confusionary. And I don't think he is that inept. I think it's on purpose. You will be amazed at the speed at which you get like computer problems, hacked, all sorts of things, if you start talking about or diffusing good information on anti-gravity technology over Unity devices and that sort of thing. And it genuinely, honestly happens. After I wrote The Face on Mars, because of some things that were in the book, I was burgled, and they tapped my lines, my phone lines. I was burgled in a very strange way because I had videos of these UFOs. That I did a video on it where I talk about. It's on the video list where I talk about a what's that guy? Bob Lazar. And so I had videos of these UFOs, which, by the way, wasn't like just me that saw the UFOs. It was such a huge event that it was on national newspapers the next day all over South Africa, because these UFOs had traveled basically down the N1, which is one of the main highways in South Africa at the time, sort of from the Karoo all the way down to Cape Town. And, hundreds, if not thousands of people had seen it, including police guys and whatever. And I made a little video about that, but I mentioned some of what happened in the book. So I was burgled without there being... The way the burglary happened is there was no break-in. In other words, they either had the key or they managed to pick the lock so well that there was no damage to the door whatsoever. And the only thing they took was the video camera and all the tapes that had this recording on it. They left the stills camera, which I hadn't used. There was cash money. They didn't touch it. There was other valuable things. They didn't touch any of those. They just took that stuff. And luckily, I had a copy of that tape out with my family, with friends. And so I retrieved that tape, and that's the tape that you can see a little bit of in the video I did. And then my phone lines started getting tapped, which, back then we're talking early 90s, mid 90s. I wrote the book in 95, so this was about 95, 94. And I was working in close protection. I was working with like very high profile people at times. And one of the guys I worked with had contacts in the national security services. Let's just call them the South African Secret Services, let's say. And I said, look, they're bugging my lines, but it's like, I don't know who's doing it and why. Can you like check with this guy? So I'm not going to mention names, but this guy had access to basically the head of what was the Secret Services of South Africa, who said, yeah, we can check it for your mate, no problem. Although, if we're checking on him, then there's probably a reason. So they tested it, and the guy came back, and he was like shocked. He was like, yeah, your friend is definitely getting bugged. There's something on the line, but the really weird thing is it's not us. I've checked and we're not doing it, so I don't know who is. And it's kind of like a bit worrying. And I knew what it was. I'd written that book, and I kind of knew I was kind of, threading the needle sort of thing. But, I've always kept myself... The people that suppress that technology are not complete idiots. I mean, and they understand that, I'm not the kind of guy to be like, oh yeah, let's all just fly around in anti-gravity machines, because one of those machines in the wrong hands can reduce this planet to a slag heap. So there are good reasons to keep it sort of protected, let's say. But you know, there are also a lot of scientific advances. For example, nobody needs to die of any disease. Literally, the psychotronic healing chambers that I talk about in my science fiction books, they're a direct result of this kind of technology, because you see, the things that nobody understands about the Maxwell equations. Let me backtrack a little bit. So Thomas Bearden, who recently passed away last year sometime, he's the only guy who'd written passages, which I still have. I actually printed them out because I was scared that that stuff would disappear, and I think the printouts are possibly somewhere else now. But I think I still have the digital formats. I need to check and reprint it. But it was an explanation of how electricity actually works instead of the stuff they teach at school, because the stuff they teach at school doesn't make sense. It's like, what, a voltage is a potential, but it also does work. It's just weird. So it's et con spiritu tui, pax vobiscum. Yeah, peace be with you and you. So what Thomas Bearden explained was that the Maxwell equations, the original equations, were done in somewhat using quaternions. And then a guy called Heaviside came along and truncated them and made them simpler. And in doing so, they lost what he calls the scalar component. Now, the thing is, this social galactic guy that calls himself an inventor, he's like, oh, well, Bearden doesn't know what he's talking about. I've read a couple of his books and it's clear he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I just asked him, oh, which books exactly did you read? Oh, well, actually, his books are no longer available on his website. So what I read is like his thing that he had on the internet about, oh, so you haven't read any of his books. Oh, and you haven't built the machine that he gives you schematics for in various of his books, and he gives you several schematics of various machines. So you haven't built a single one of those over Unity devices, and you haven't actually read any of his books, and yet you keep saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. But Bearden is the only guy that when you read what he wrote, if you can follow what he's saying, at a very basic level, by the way, I'm not talking about the time reverse stuff, I'm talking just about basic electrical stuff. Suddenly a light bulb goes off in your head, and I remember distinctly in the writing, it was like, if the reader's been paying attention at this point, they should be having a light bulb moment. And that's exactly what I was having at the moment that I read that. Bearden knew exactly what he was talking about. And here's the really important thing. It's very difficult to explain. I'm a layman. I'm not a physicist. I'm not an electrical engineer by any stretch of the imagination. So the way I'm going to explain it is obviously an approximation, okay? But I think it's a better approximation than anything else you've been told. Magnetism and electricity are obviously related. We all know, or hopefully you know, that if we have a cable like this, and you pass an electric current, say positive, negative, then you've got an electric current going from A to B. What you have is a magnetic field, which is the right-hand rule, right? You put your thumb in the direction of the flow, and where your fingers wrap around, that is, you've got a magnetic field. So, similarly, if you take magnets and you either move a metal wire past them, or you move the magnets past them, again, you can create a current inside this cable. Why? Oh, well, it's magic, it's magnetic fields. No. Now, there was a concept at Maxwell's time which was known as the ether. The ether actually exists, but it is not, you know, when I say it's not the way they envisioned it, what I mean is it's not the way they present it to you as it was envisioned. In other words, the people today that talk about the ether say, oh yes, you know, in the 1800s and the 1700s, they used to think that there was this gaseous matter all over the universe, and that is how things propagated, things like gravity and magnetic fields and electricity. No, it's not a little gas all over the earth. It's actually a property of reality. Think of a fish in the ocean, and you tell the fish, hey, you know, there's so much water around here. And the fish is like, what the hell are you talking about? What is this water you mention? He's not aware of it because he's like sitting in it. Now, it is an acknowledged fact, even by modern physicists, by any physicist will tell you this, that in a cubic centimeter of empty space, of so-called vacuum, there is a bubbling and appearing and disappearing of protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, subatomic particles. It's a bubbling of creation and uncreation going on. And if you could access the energy that's going through that cubic centimeter of water, you could boil off Lake Garda. Okay? If you could access all the energy that's inside 1 cubic meter of so-called empty space of vacuum, that's enough energy to boil off all the water and all the oceans of this planet. So, is it really empty vacuum then? Well, yes, well, no. Because you see, matter, this espresso cup, the espresso I'm drinking, my body, when you go right down to it, they taught you at school, oh, well, atoms are these little balls. Then you get, that was in high school or whatever. Or rather, that was elementary school. Then you get to high school, and they're like, well, they're not really little balls. They're like a little solar system. There's like a bunch of little balls in the middle, and then there's all these little tiny electron balls floating around. And then you get to university, and it's like, well, actually, that was a lot of bullshit. It's kind of a statistical probability of a charge that's floating and moving, and we're not really sure. And then we get really down to it, and it's quarks. And quarks are really another just energy sort of wave thing that's... Matter is just an interference pattern. Yes, I'm a very, of course, handsome, beautiful, and intelligent interference pattern, but that's all I really am. I'm a coherent interference pattern, much more coherent than most, much more handsome than most, even when I'm unshaven and wearing my fashionable farmer's clothing. But in essence, there is an interference that creates what we call physical matter. That's why my fingers bump into each other, because whatever's creating this frequency, this thing, is the same as this thing, so they bump into each other. But for all we know, slightly out of phase, we could have a whole other reality right next to us. So, for example, ghosts or, alternate realities or demons or whatever. They could all be living right next to us. Very much like in a crystal, on one plane you could save data, and then on a tiny one angle, 1 degree different angle, you could save a whole bunch of data again without interfering with the first one. But if they're on the same plane and the same frequency, then they interfere with each other. So all of this is like, oh yeah, I kind of knew that. A lot of you people are probably thinking, yeah, I kind of know that. I kind of figured that out. Well, the thing that almost nobody talks about and almost nobody includes are 2 aspects of it. One is time, and the other one is consciousness. The only model of physics that I'm aware of that includes consciousness as part of the model of the physics of the universe is the one of Burkhard Heim. Burkhard Heim was a scientist who lived in the Nazi era. He worked for the Nazis at some point. He made a whole bunch of bombs. He invented the fuel air bomb and some other bombs that were even bigger than that. And he blew himself up in one of his experiments, lost his hands, was deaf, dumb, and blind, pretty much almost. But he still put together this theory of physics, which includes consciousness, which in my mind makes absolute sense. And in my book, The Face on Mars, which, by the way, I recommend to all of you, go out there, click on my blog and buy The Face on Mars, Filotto, because it's got a lot of these concepts in there. The Face on Mars is, and honestly, it's not just because I wrote it, I'm not just trying to sound like great or whatever, but it is one of the best reference books you will ever find on all this esoteric stuff, and written at layman level, kind of like I'm talking to you now, nothing too fancy. It's got some formulas and stuff there, but it's all explained, the maths is shown to you, the formulas are broken down at the beginning of the book, so it's nothing complicated. But as I said in The Face on Mars, if we have consciousness, in other words, if I'm a conscious human being, right? I'm a conscious living thing. And then you look at a dog. A dog is a conscious living person, thing, creature. Then you look at a cockroach. A cockroach is less conscious than me or a dog, but it's still alive. It's still walking around. Then you go down to amoebas. They're living. They've got some level of consciousness. Plants. We have now measured plants and we know that they respond to certain stimuli. We know they are alive. Now you look at, there are certain types of creatures that are it's almost hard to differentiate whether they're like living or minerals, you know. And then you get, say, to a rock. Now, a rock certainly doesn't look conscious, doesn't look alive, but if the property of consciousness is part of this universe, then on some level there must be some aspect of consciousness that can become more or less prevalent. So, for example, angels, if you believe in such a thing, might be super conscious, and they don't even need a physical body because they are in a slightly different frequency or whatever, where they can materialize physical things, again, if you believe in miracles, angels, and so on, while human beings, oh, thank you very much. Department of Transportation says face on Mars is very good. Well, human beings are, you know, less able to like materialize things just with the consciousness. But keep in mind, we haven't defined what consciousness is yet, right? And then there's this aspect of time, which again, we experience as linear, but physicists understand that, or even religious people from the aspect of, say, God, time is not linear. So what do we mean by that? Well, there's the work of Peter Garayev, which you can find out quite a lot of detailed information on that in my other book, the Systema book. Roland McCraty and Peter Garayev did an experiment together. I'm the only guy that knows this, as far as I know, that's ever written about it, because it was never put in the literature, because McCraty didn't have the equipment to do it. So they used Stanford's laser interferometry in one weekend, him and Peter Garayev, and they proved. I spoke to McCraty, I emailed him on this, and he told me I was absolutely there. What Garayev says is real. And I wasn't sure, because Peter Garayev made some claims that were weird and fantastic and seemingly miraculous. I've got Peter Garayev's books in Russian. He sent them to me because, again, I emailed him using a girlfriend and a friend of mine who speak Russian. But basically, the summary of what I can say about Peter Garayev's work is that, in my opinion, and it is my simplification of it, he calls it a wave genome thing. But you know how we have 90% of our DNA supposedly junk DNA, or 98%? Well, it's not junk DNA. Our DNA is actually a way to create tiny microscopic wormholes that receive and send information backwards and forwards in time, which explains why things like timeline therapy in hypnosis or past life regression in hypnosis actually have real physiological effects on a person and can heal them, because you can heal a trauma that happened in your past by getting into a hypnotic trance state where you send information back in time that heals. I know it sounds crazy, right? Now, most hypnotists will not tell you this. They'll say, oh, well, you're just going into a suggestive state and then, you know, you fix up your trauma. Yes, but how? Why exactly? Why would that work? And this is how it works. So time is a component of reality. Time and consciousness, and what Bearden calls scalar, the scalar component of energy. So if we have a current or a magnetic field, you can say it's, you could think of it as an ocean of energy, right? And inside this ocean, you can have currents. And in these currents, you could have let me put it another way. Okay, so on this ocean you have waves, right? The wind makes the waves hit the beach and create an effect. And that you could think of as the normal electricity that we experience. So the wind being a charge or a potential or something that causes the waves have an effect on the beach. But then there are deep currents under the ocean which also create effects, but they're not normally usually visible to the naked eye because, well, you get actually more waves happening in a certain direction, whatever, because of the current, but you're not really aware of the current, especially if you're a fish in the sea. So this current could be thought of as the scalar component. So there is a massive amount of energy all around us, but it is traveling in a slightly, let's say, out of phase with what we consider normal reality, although it's not out of phase with reality, it is part of reality. And the point of this scalar energy is that it is also intimately connected to time, as is anything. Like people say, oh, what is a photon? You go and find, you go and tell me what is a photon. A photon is a little packet of energy, they say. Oh, but exactly what is it? Well, it's a little packet of energy, but it also has a component of time. And that's why you've got the light barrier, which, by the way, has been broken. They've transmitted Mozart's 40th Symphony at 4.7 times light speed in 92, I believe, in the University of Cologne. And I've heard the actual symphony being played, so it works. You can go faster than light. But the thing that I was trying to get at is that the interplay between physical reality, my finger touching the desk or whatever, is an interplay between, yes, a frequency of energies, but there's a time component there. And this time component can be reversed. And we know it can be reversed also because of the junk DNA, which does the wormhole thing. Tiny microscopic wormholes, which don't allow you, well, me anyway, to like hyperspace into time and space and so on. But remember how Jesus said in the Bible, all these things that I do, you will do and more. I believe that somehow, I don't know how and I don't know how to get there, it is possible that potentially a conscious living human being could get into a state where they could affect reality to certain extents and or shift possibly dimension to some level, whether only in their mind, whether physically and physiologically, it's arguable. But anyway, the point of the beard and stuff, and I'm sort of going a little bit off the point, but not really, is that he takes into account this time component. And he basically says that all that a current is a kind of pressure, because that's what it used to be thought of. Current and magnetism were thought of as pressure on the ether. Or you could think of it in another way as a slightly out of phase frequency that then displays an effect. A force produces a force. But a force has to have a time component. You can't have a force without a time component. Now, what he calls scalar energy is something that just has dimension, but it doesn't have a direction, but it also has to have a time component. Everything, anything that you can describe, talk about, or even conceive of must have a time component. And if this time, what he says, for example, that an electron is, he says, oh, an electron is negative or positive depending on whether the time component is reversed or not. So rather than thinking of current as little balls of electrons flowing down a wire, you could think of it as the time aspect of that tiny particle or eddy of energy being reversed. And you sort of say, well, how can the time be reversed? I'd be going backwards in time. Well, no, because it's related to that particular thing. Now, how does this work with the psychotronic healing chambers that I talk about? Well, what happens is, if you are, remember that you're just an interfering pattern of energies of a certain quality. When you get sick, if you get cancer, that frequency changes. Now, we actually know that it's been measured. There are machines that measure Kirlian photography. It started out. They can actually photograph your magnetic aura, your magnetic field. Everything has a magnetic field. We have one. So these woo-woo guys that talk about seeing auras, it's not bullshit. You can see auras. In the Systema book, I teach you how to do it in 10 minutes. Between the book and the videos, when you buy the book, you also get to access the videos. You can learn how to see auras in about 10-15 minutes. 95% of people see it in about 10 minutes. Out of 100 people, maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 at most will not see it right away. Of those, a few will see it. Well, they take longer. They might take half an hour or whatever. And 1 or 2 will not see it, but that's because they got a mental block to like, no, I don't want to see this stuff. Almost anybody can see auras if you train to do it. There are dangers to it and whatever. I go into this in a lot more detail in the Systema book. So if you want to know about that stuff, read in there. But anyway, the point is that we all have this magnetic field. Now, when you're sick, when you've got like cancer or the flu or whatever, this field changes. So what Bearden's saying is like, well, if you can create a machine that registers or understands how this field is supposed to be, or feeds into this field without knowing anything, but feeds in the correct frequency of energy, then your body will heal itself. And so you can create a machine that heals cancers and all sorts of things. Sounds great, right? Like science fiction. Well, no. It was created in the 60s and 70s in France. And Bearden explains who the guy was, and he talks about it. I'm actually, there's a guy that commented on the blog. I'm just going to find the link and give it to you guys. Who had a very good link to it, and I'm going to do another blog post on it because it's very interesting. But here, where's your copy link? There you go. I'm putting the link in the chat now. By the way, Bearden is dead, but Bill Sinclair is the guy who was looking after his stuff. And when I bought Bearden's books, he actually wrote me a very nice note saying thank him, because I bought like a couple $100 worth of books in one go. Anyway, if you go there, it explains what I'm talking about the sort of healing thing. And it references the fact that, you know, this stuff was done in the 60s and 70s in France. The Soviets have been doing this for years. Like my Russian friends that like have got like a few contacts because of Systema, like these guys training, you know, they're special forces, they know people and whatever. The VIPs in the Soviet Union have been using this kind of machines for decades to like heal themselves. There's no need for anybody to die of cancer or COVID or whatever, you know, or anything. You can literally heal anything with this stuff. I actually had on the blog, I've actually got when I broke my Achilles tendon some years back, I actually got an electromagnetic sort of little mat, which was supposed to be, oh, you know, help you heal and whatever. And I tried it out and it absolutely worked. It was helpful. I also did hypnosis. I also did my own exercises because the guys who fixed the British doctor, well, British from India doctor that fixed my Achilles tendon did a butcher's job. I mean, if I hadn't done my own exercises, I'd probably not be able to walk properly or whatever. But I did my own exercises throughout. And that little electromagnetic mat worked, and it helped heal it faster. Definitely made an impact. So these things are real. The things I'm talking about are not nonsense. And Bearden knew what he was talking about. You know, if you can follow what he writes, it's absolutely realistic, the things. So I've never really had the time. Keep in mind I'm 53 and I moved 54 times. And now I've got, you know, 5 kids and a farm to look after. So it's not like I've got a lot of spare time. But I've always wanted to delve into this stuff a bit more. In fact, before I broke my Achilles tendon, I had got the since declassified top secret documents from the British Library about both of the methods that the Nazis used in their submarines to power them, because they were getting this power from somewhere. Their submarines could stay underwater for months at a time without surfacing, and they had these secret sort of power mechanisms, and one of them I was going to build, and I had found a professor that was willing to sponsor it full-time for 1 year. I would have got a master's degree in electromagnetism, and then I broke my Achilles tendon and everything went to shit, and the money I'd saved up I'd use, you know, to just live and so on. So that went down the drain. But and my maths need work. You know, I would need to understand a lot better calculus, and you know, how to use that much more fluently than I do now, on one aspect. On another aspect, the people who created these machines that healed cancers and everything, they didn't know any of the maths either. And if you can understand that consciousness and time are both part of the reality that creates us, the interface that makes us, you know, physical objects, are all in there, and you start to think with that mind about electricity and energy and magnetism, and you realize that if you have a magnet here and that you have an electric wire there and you pass them next to each other and a current is created, It's not some magical field that has no force, that has no existence. There's something happening here, and that what that happening is the ether is being affected, and the ether is described and defined by Harold Aston, which is a site that I'm well, a friend of mine has actually put it up, but I gave my word to Harold Aston's widow that I would keep that site up as much as I could, and the guy that that originally was doing it, he like stopped keeping it up because, oh well, she didn't pay anymore. Well, she died, dude. You know. But so I took all the files, and this very generous crusading man, who's one of our crusader friends overseas, he's put up this website, haroldaston.com. All of his works are there, all for free. All the ones I could get my hands on that that Wendy, his widow, gave to me before she passed away, and she asked me, please keep this up all over the world as much as you can for nothing. I don't need money for it or whatever, and that's what I'm doing. And it's actually thanks to the generosity of one of the other crusaders that site is up. But all his books are there, and they're brilliant. His books are brilliant. I had hard copies, which I've sent to my dad, and I hope to God he still got them, because in one of my huge moves, I've lost libraries and libraries of stuff. One of the things that bugs me the most is I had Nikola Tesla's all his patents in one book, and my brother put the stuff in storage in a valley that gets flooded. So that's gone, along with it, hundreds of, if not thousands of other books. But I think the ones that I've sent my dad are still with him. So, and they're very hard to find. You can't find them on Amazon or whatever. And I think, you know, some of his family were trying to like make money out of his books or whatever. But they're all available on the website. And if you want to mirror it, because it was his wish and it was Wendy's wish that people just have access to the information. Harold Aston gave the best description of how the ether works and what it actually is that I've ever read, and it's not a gas thing. But then I'm not sure that the people in Maxwell's time were saying was some kind of gas either. I think that's just how the average midwit today interprets what they were trying to say back then. But keep in mind that the average midwit now uses the Heaviside truncated Maxwell equations and has lost out all the scalar component and a whole bunch of other things. I hope, is this useful to you guys? There's 20 of you watching, so tell me if what I'm saying is making sense or if it just sounds like I'm babbling nonsense. It's not nonsense, but it's sometimes hard for me just in general anyways to understand the average person, what they're missing or what they're not missing of what I'm saying. So I'll go through the chat quickly. Oh, Rhino Bear is here. Let's see, just some people saying hello, and then Cordell Mitchell says you can epoxy fiberglass welding blanket material together and make pistol and shotgun round proof plates. Yes, but I'm talking about rifle proof plates. Sam Werb says good morning. Neophile, oh, he's the one that said Pax Vobiscum. I'm with you. Department of Transportation says rotating magnetic fields and high power through them. Yes. Merck says, or black hole aliens. You know, if you're shifting realities or planes of existence or frequencies, planes of existence. You know, if you've played Dungeons and Dragons, you would know that there are many different planes: the astral, the ethereal, you know, the demonic, and I think that that's a valid sort of thing. Merck says, okay, either living aliens, maybe those would be scarier. Well, I bust fat rap says based. Okay, Sam Werb. Off topic, did you see that Mikhail Rabko has died? Yes, I did. Mikhail Rabko was the sort of founder of the Rabko Systema. He passed away a few days ago. He died of stomach cancer. It was a pretty long and protracted disease, and you know, and I know there's some little gam out there going, hey, if those guys have access to all those kind of machines, why didn't he get healed? Well, again, just because that these machines exist and they're accessible by certain VIPs doesn't mean that everybody gets access to them, even people like Michael Ryabko. And I'm not, Michael Ryabko achieved a lot of stuff, and he did a lot of things, and he trained a lot of people, and he absolutely, despite what a lot of detractors on Bullshido would say, I don't know of any human being, none, including serious, hectic, criminal gang people, okay, that came to confront Mikhail in his classes. I don't know of any human being that actually spent any time with Mikhail Ryabko, trying to test if he's a real martial artist or not, that walked away from there thinking, yeah, this guy's just a big round fat dude who can't do anything. Mikhail Ryabko could like do whatever the hell he wanted with me. He could like beat me up like I would beat a little child, okay? And I've been doing martial arts since I was 4. So yes, he didn't look like a sportsman or anything, but the guy could do stuff that is still difficult to explain. And he trained people that can still do stuff that's difficult to explain, like Vladimir Vasilyev, Sergei Orzelyev, Vadim Dobrin. There's a lot of guys that are better than me. And when I say a lot, we're talking, I don't know, dozens, and probably there's maybe a few hundred in the world that I don't know about. But it's a very small number of people that have that ability, and Mikhail Ryabko definitely was one of them. If you're interested in the Systema stuff, read the Systema book. But there's a reason why I wrote the Systema book, because some of the claims made by even some of the higher ups are a little bit fantastic. Not in that they're not able or capable of doing very great things. They are, but for example, there was this thing that like, oh, well, if you're doing Japanese martial art katas, you're actually invoking demons, and it's a lot of horse shit. So there was a little bit of cult of personality going on, which I don't agree with at all. So that's why I wrote the book, to demystify stuff and just bring it back down to the military science that it is, because it is a military science. Now, with any martial art that is valid, that is real, anything that has got a component where you're essentially talking about war, because that's what it is, it's got to have a higher order stuff. If you read Gorin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi in there says, well, the topic or the concept of strategy is one of the 10 holy things. And it is, because whether you like it or not, even in heaven, right, there was a war, okay, there was a third of the host left. Strategy is part of reality, and it's not a bad thing. Just like a weapon is not a bad thing, it's what you do with it, right? So there is a higher aspect to Systema, like with any martial art. If you train any martial art, you become a better person, a real martial art, right? And if you're doing some this woo, like, oh, I am just going to stun you with my, and you see those guys that, oh, I'm going to stun you with my thing, when they get in front of a real martial artist, they lose teeth, right? Mikhail Ryabko is not one of these guys. He did some woo-woo stuff, but he never backed away from somebody saying, okay, I'm going to try and plant you now. You do your woo-woo stuff to me. And you also have to understand that this Systema stuff, when you see a guy like just falling over, it's not that he's falling over because there's some magical energy. He's falling over because the alternative is to not fall over, continue with that movement, and get clocked in a way that is a lot harder and a lot more painful than if you just get yourself out the way by falling over or rolling to the side or whatever. So a lot of Systema, all Systema videos look kind of fake, but that's because you don't know what you're watching. So anyway, went way off the tangent. So Department of Transportation says, got to go to dinner, have a good one, and God bless you too, sir. Mighty Bear, this topic reminds me of in him we move and have our being writ large. It is. That's a brilliant, that's the thing, religion and science are actually, real science and real religion, they're actually one thing. They're like together. Which is why Catholic monks invented the scientific method. Or perhaps better, all things hold together in Christ. Yeah, that also. Merg Maglaramaxis. Okay. You think the machine still exists in the Russian Federation? Oh yeah, they have them. I'm absolutely certain of it. But then I'm absolutely certain that they've got spaceships that work, anti-gravity machines that work. I believe we've had bases on the moon since the 70s. There's a book written in the early 70s, I think, somebody else, or maybe even late 60s, before the lunar landing, supposedly, saying somebody else is on the moon. There's like giant machines up there. There's a guy on YouTube, I can't remember the link or whatever, who actually films this giant spaceship. He's got a big telescope hooked up to and he films them and he goes, oh, well, there's another one. And, it's pretty gritty sort of imagery, but it ties in with that, I forgot the name of the guy, that autistic guy who hacked into the Pentagon thing and found lists of ships with like up to 300 people on board, but these are not like water ships, they're like spaceships. And the US wanted to extradite him out of the UK for like years, and eventually they couldn't. The UK actually managed to keep him at home for whatever reason. Is his name spelled Bearden? No, Bearden, D-E-N at the end. Just like you have it, Thomas Bearden. And he was a retired ex-lieutenant colonel of the US Army. Neophyte 1 says, very interesting topics from a traditional Catholic point of view. You've got to understand that Catholic thinkers are the people that literally created the scientific method. Catholic thinkers like Thomas Aquinas considered the concept of aliens on other planets and how that affected, how that tied into Catholicism. Catholic thinkers are the most aligned with actual reality because Catholicism is true. Now, you might not like it, you might think it's crazy, you might think Catholicism is absurd. I certainly thought Catholicism was absurd for at least 35, if not more, years of my life. I thought it was complete and utter nonsense. Some guy comes back from the dead after you've nailed him to a tree, a lot of rubbish. And then, then I had something happen that proved to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that, oh, wait, that was totally wrong. And that's okay, Neophyte 1 says, I've always wondered why the universe is as enormous as it is if we're the only living planet. Statistically speaking, we can't be. And in fact, again, if you read The Face on Mars, you'll know for a fact there was other living beings, at least on Mars, for sure. Neophyte 1 goes, and the whole phenomenon of aliens, though I think Jacques Vallée is right. I'm not sure what you mean about Jacques Vallée. You mean the concept that aliens are like beings from another dimension or demonic creatures, or you see, I think both things, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have demonic creatures, beings, spirits that will pretend to be aliens and or UFOs and or whatever to like fuck with you. And you can have real little green men or whatever you want to call them in UFOs, although I actually personally believe that most UFOs are our own stuff that the so-called secret governments have got flying around and whatever, and they've had them since the Nazi era. Again, if you read up Operation High Jump, or if you just want a nice story that has all the technology that is real, just read my science fiction books. Just go on Overlords of Mars. Just type in my name on Amazon and look up Overlords of Mars. 2 books. I know there's a 3rd book in the series which I need to finish. I'll get there. I will one day. Before I die, I promise you I will finish that series. Okay, Josie says, sorry, I found it bearded. Oh, okay, I think this is really interesting. Oh, good. Mighty Bear says, makes more sense than anything the science says. Thank you. Merg, how do you say that? Majora Maxis. Merg Majora Maxis. I need to rewatch this. Jumping in and out, playing with a munchkin cat and preparing a bath. Yeah, that's not gonna do it. You will have to rewatch this. Hacken Eggman says Saint Walpurg's Night. Okay. Cooper Chauvin, hello, sir. And by the way, Cooper, I still want you to give me a written report of your role-playing game with your friends about the my role-playing game, the Surviving the Current Zombie Apocalypse. That is on Amazon as well, by the way, which is really a training tool for the current times. Anyway, Cooper says, I'm generally following what you're saying. Probably helps that I read your books. It probably does, yes. Merg says, to be fair, I had the Seeley from Stephen Baxter in mind. I haven't read the Stephen. I know the Seeley are an alien race. I don't know. I haven't read his books, so I haven't read all of his books. I've read some of it. I haven't read the ones with the Seeleys in it. Sam Werb says, I believe in the ether. Yeah, thank you. So did I, since I was really quite young and I started to understand it. You see, when I started to learn about physics in high school, I was like, wait, but this ether thing that they're saying doesn't exist, but that actually kind of makes sense. And then they just throw all this bullshit at you that you're like, oh, okay, I must have it wrong. And you kind of forget about it. But yeah, though I don't have enough math or physics to follow you. No, but that's the thing. You see, that's the thing. You don't need the maths to get things right. For example, a lot of the stuff, like one of the reasons that they think wormholes, you can't have a spaceship that creates a wormhole and goes to another side of the galaxy, is because to create a wormhole roughly this size, about 1 meter in diameter, you need to convert the entirety of the mass of the planet Jupiter into energy using the E equals mc squared thing. Now, using that formula, 1 gram of matter, 1 gram is like a tiny bit of paper, like say like this. That's roughly speaking maybe 1 gram, okay? It's a bit of paper. 1 gram of matter converted to pure energy using that formula. And if you can access that energy as, we need about 2,500 calories a day to like live nicely, that if you could convert that 1 gram into pure energy and that energy into energy that can be used for a human body, you could feed 25,000 people for a year. Now imagine converting the whole of Jupiter into full energy, and that's what you need to like keep a wormhole this big open for a little while. So that's why they're saying, oh, it's impossible. Well, but is it? Because if 1 cubic meter of empty space, you've got enough energy to boil off all the oceans of the planet. And you can create a machine that accesses that potential difference, however tiny that access is, because there is so much power in there, even if it's like 10 to the minus 50 of a potential difference, you've got enough energy to do whatever the hell you want, including opening vast wormholes. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. And this stuff comes, there's a really good book called, was it Black Holes and Time Warps by Kip Thorne. I read this more than 25, 30 years ago. Very good book, except for the last bit where he says that you can use wormholes to travel back in time, and there's some mistakes there. But the thing is, Kip Thorne does all the maths, and he knows how to do all the maths. But there are Russian scientists that go to Western scientists because they don't know how to do all the maths, but they can do the logic. And the thing about engineering is you can do the logic. Like, you don't have to know the theory behind a combustion engine to build one. There are mechanics out there that they will not even know, they don't know what the chemical composition of petrol is or how it works, but they'll put that engine together and it'll work. So you got to get away from this thing that like, I need to do the maths. No. Do you need to do the maths to lift up a coffee cup and drink it? I guarantee you there's a formula that will define 90 to 98% of probabilities of how I'm going to lift the cap and what angle I'm going to bring it to my lips at. There is a formula that you could figure out that will cover 98% of the ways that I moved in order to drink the coffee, okay? Do you need to know that to drink the coffee? No. Do you need to know that to see somebody drinking the coffee? No. Do you need to know that to build the cup? No. Or make the coffee? No. Get away from this thing that you have to do this because. Get away from it. There's a Russian guy who built a floating little, almost like a bike platform, by taking the wings of these bugs and gluing them to a board about the size, like that you could stand on. And he flew around with it. It's documented, okay? There are some weird, really clever, cool things out there, but you need to experiment. For me, the biggest understanding of this was, you know how they say, oh, Einstein flunked maths and then they kicked him out of maths, and because of that he figured out relativity because he could like do maths in a way that wasn't taught at school. And that may well have been true, but I don't like Einstein. I used to really think Einstein was really cool, and then I found out he's a plagiarist. He abandoned his child. He was a pervert who like banged his own cousin. It was like really quite a twisted guy. But in my own life, I dropped history because I had a terrible history teacher in high school. And I thought, this guy was obsessed with the Russian Bolsheviks, and I was like, I couldn't care less about them. Now I know why. And so I dropped history. And then later in life, I started reading history books by myself. And then I'm the guy that figured out 10 years later, with The Face on Mars, what the real history of the human race is, to a degree that no one else has figured out. Even the people that have plagiarized it, like Graham Hancock, who admitted to plagiarizing my book, they haven't figured it out. But I did. And it's like, wow, of all the people on the planet, I figured out something about ancient history? Yeah, because I wasn't blocked off by school. See, what they do in school is they indoctrinate you to be a sheep. And it's like the elephant with the string. When you tie a string to the leg of a small elephant, by the time he's big, he can break the string, but he'll never go beyond it because that's what he's got trained at. And that's what school is. It just puts these artificial barriers in your head that, oh, you can't understand this. Really? Well, why don't you just take it? Yes, it's true that maybe you messing around with electricity, you will electrocute yourself and die. So, yeah, there's that risk. Maybe you're going to do some wrong shit. Like, put some big pole up and bam, lightning hits you just while you're holding it and you're gone. Yeah, maybe. But you know what? You can not look both ways when you're crossing the street and you're done. So use your imagination. Use your intellect. Use your brain. You don't need to know necessarily all the maths to engineer stuff. Engineering is science, is the real science. Physics is the theory. And you can literally build something that works without really knowing exactly how exactly. I know a kid, he is the brother of one of my very first girlfriends. And this guy he didn't go to school for this. He didn't study electronics. He was 12 years old. And the old TV broke and bust, just like started fizzing smoke out the back. And this 12-year-old kid with a screwdriver undid it and fixed it. How the fuck he did that, I have no clue. And when I tried to ask him, I said, but what did you do? And he's like, because this has to go. And I'm like, how do you know that? He didn't even read. He only maybe read comic books. So it's like, I don't know, he was an idiot savant about electronic components. You don't need to know stuff to figure something out. In fact, sometimes the less you know, the better. Cordell says, this stuff is way above me, but I've spoken to people who had a friend that kicked a waterborne illness while they were in Mexico by being exposed to some form of electromagnetic radiation. I believe the frequency healing is real. It is absolutely real. And you know what? The thing is, you can do it with your head. You can do it with your mind. There are documented cases of ulcerative colitis being healed by a change in mental attitude. In fact, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, I don't think there's anything against it because he wrote about it. Adam Piggott, although he did go to a doctor that prescribed some herbs and whatever, he had ulcerative colitis. Now, ulcerative colitis is not a joke. I used to work for a guy who has it, and he manages it with medicines and so on. My brother's girlfriend got it and she was going to die. They had to have an operation on her, otherwise she would, within like days, she was just wasting away to nothing. And yet there are documented cases of people healing ulcerative colitis while they're like in the middle of nowhere, just by like, and these are like I can't remember if it was a Tibetan monk or whatever. And he had this, and then when he finally got to civilization, because it was in the middle of the mountains or whatever, they did all sorts of tests on him, and they're like, how the hell did you like heal yourself? And he goes, oh, well, I just meditated. And again, if you accept the theory of your junk DNA being able to produce tiny wormholes, and hypnosis being able to access that to some degree or other, if you put yourself in a relevant trance state, you could possibly do that. Now, again, there's going to be people saying, oh, you evil bastard, you're saying that if somebody dies of cancer it's because they didn't meditate in the correct way. I'm not saying that. I don't know how to do that stuff, but it's related to prayer. It's the same way. Like if you pray correctly, your prayer gets answered. And I've done videos on this. Look, you can try and shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what I have personally experienced empirically by doing scientific tests. And, you know, that's all I'm saying. Mighty Bear says, Lunar Nazis! Yes! Yes, Mighty Bear. You might want to read my Overlords of Mars series, which I'm kind of sorry I changed the cover, because I had this photograph of my wife. She's my wife now, but she wasn't then. And her eyes were like perfect for the cover, so I put her on the cover. But the original cover had like a big sort of Nazi insignia with the moon as a background, and I'd actually like that cover better. I mean, obviously I like the cover with my wife's eyes on it, but the other cover I think is more of an impact. I like the one with my wife on it because, you know, personal other reasons. But Sam Webb says, I recently watched a few Systema drills and exercises on the Cutting Edge Systema channel there. Here, the instructor seems humble, modest, and isn't desperate to appear to be tough. If I remember right, that's Poynton, Rob Poynton, if it's the same guy. Yeah, he's a nice guy, and you know, I've trained with him. I know Rob. I didn't train with him many times, but he's a good guy. He's not an egomaniac or anything. The thing about Systema videos is that, like, you don't know what you're watching. You know, the drills in Systema are designed to, like, keep you in a completely relaxed state, and you have to train yourself to stay in a completely relaxed state when progressively more intense things are happening. So, you know, you see, oh, a slow punch, and then it's like, oh, the guy moves slowly, and oh, it's also fake. Yeah, but that's because that's the level at which the guy can still react in a way that doesn't bring up his fight or flight syndrome. When you get better, you can go full, you know, more, and then it looks a little bit more real. But you have to have a pretty advanced guy to be able to take on a hardcore, proper attack from a proper martial artist who moves correctly in Systema. And, you know, the top guys can do it, but they don't often demonstrate that, because also the guy that's attacking is usually a Systema student. So he's doing it in a way that he's also protecting himself. Because, you know, I've had like an SAS guy like come in, oh, I want to fight with you. I've had boxers, oh, I want to see what you can do, you know. I've had like, two of the funniest ones were these guys. They're almost like twins, you know. They don't know each other, they weren't related, but they were both this much taller than I am, and a good 20-30 kilos on me, and built like fucking brick shit houses, and no fat on them. You know, this is all muscle, and not even, you know, it's not steroid muscles. They're just giants. And they were both doormen. And the one guy, his ears are like cauliflowers, because he was also a wrestler. Like, these guys are like big, strong, aggressive. They've had street fights plenty of, and they're trained, right? So they're not like nobodies. And one of these guys is actually quite humble. And when we first started training together, we were doing an exercise where we're just like punching each other on the chest to teach you how to take a strike and not tense up. And you know, and I was like, oh, finally, you know, I got a big guy. I can actually do the exercise properly. I can let myself go a little bit. And I wasn't hitting him, right? It's still just a movement and just throwing a little hand in there. And after about 4 strikes on his chest, and he's doing 4 on me, keep in mind, every time he hits me, I move back like 2 steps, right? And he's not punching me either. He's just giving me a little tap, right? But his little love taps move me like a couple of meters. And I'm, you know, hitting him. After the 4th one, he goes, listen, I don't know how you're doing it, but please, can you stop? Because every time you hit me, I think you're going to break some ribs. Can you go a little bit softer for me, please? And he wasn't like, at first I almost started to laugh, thinking he was fucking with me. And I was like, oh, okay, sorry, dude. You know. So then That was one. And the other guy was a bit more arrogant. And he came in and he's like, "Oh, are you the instructor here?" And he does this, from his head to my head. It's like, "You're the instructor here. What can you do?" "Yeah, we'll play with you." And he was like East Block guy. And I'm like, yeah, we can play. And again, I was polite. But, we're doing the training. I'm like, "Yeah, you can go a bit now. We want to see what I can do. I don't know. Let's see what I can do." And after about 5-10 minutes of like just doing little exercises, but now I'm doing them with him with a little bit more meaning, right? He's like, "Okay, thank you. I'm very sorry. I was very arrogant. Thank you very much. I would like to learn from you. And I'm sorry if I was a bit rude. I didn't mean to be rude. I was just making a joke." It was like, okay. And I didn't take liberties on it. I just did the exercise a little bit more with meaning. Same speed as he was doing it, nothing different. And he realized, "Oh, whoa, this guy can do shit that I don't understand." So, it's not about ego. It's about learning how to move, and you won't understand what's going on in a Systema drill that you're watching. So, I remember, people used to be scared. They used to phone me. It took me a year to figure out, why is these people calling me? "I'd like to come and watch a class." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, come." "Okay, but can I just come and look?" "Yeah, all right, come and look, but why? If you're gonna come all the way there, why don't you just join in, man?" And I didn't realize, it took me a year to realize these guys are scared, right? I'd get people that come in and sit and watch. And I remember once I was sparring with a friend of mine, and I slipped because the gym we used to train in, they had a spinning class going on there, and I slipped on the sweat, piss, water, whatever it was that was on the floor while I was sparring with this guy. And as I slipped, I started to fall backwards. And the other guy rushed me, because he's like, "Oh, good, he's falling." He's immediately taking his chance to like, but as I'm falling, I'm like, "Oh, I can see his foot there." And I just gently pushed on his foot, not kicked at it because I would have broken his ankle. Pushed his foot so that he like fell towards me. And as I'm falling, I like spun around and I put him in a lock and took. And the guys watching were like, they're both like, "What the hell?" And I saw them out of the corner of my eye while I was doing this, like, "How the fuck did he even do that? How did you do that? You just slipped, in a way that you couldn't plan for, took the guy out while you're falling, grabbed him before you've even sort of, as you hit the ground, and roll over and put him in a lock." It's like, what the fuck? And it looks like, Hollywood science fiction, but it just happens from the training because you're not tense, so you can see a lot more. And I remember once he's actually a very, I want to say, he is famous in that industry for special effects, and he moved to the States now. He's like one of the top special effects guys in films. Any film that you've seen in the last 15-20 years that's got special effects, this guy's probably there. And he heads a whole team of people now. And he was training with us. French guy who was like quite into knives and stuff. Really nice man. Anyway, in the class, he like did a spinning like elbow to my jaw. And like he did it perfect. The timing and everything, like boom, caught me on the jaw. And again, because of the training, it's not something that I could consciously try and do. I like hit his elbow with my jaw and he fell over. So he did a spinning elbow to my face and it knocked him out. And it wasn't because, he wasn't out of balance and it was just the way the impact was done, which the timing has to be absolutely perfect. As he fell over, I looked at him like thinking, how the fuck did I do that? And he looked at me like, how did you do that? And they're like, I don't know, dude. I'm pretty sure if we do that another 1,000,000 times, I won't get it right and I'll be knocked out. But it's a little bit like, the Bourne thing, like the first Bourne film where he's sleeping on a park bench and 2 cops come and harass him and he just like wipes them out. And he's like, shit, how did I do that? That's kind of like what training in Systema does, because you're training your nervous system to stay in a state that is not designed for fighting. So when it happens and you're using that state to fight, you're like, my body did that. I don't really know how that happened. So it's a pretty cool sort of thing. Sylvester, I'm fascinated by the electricity physics. I'd enjoy doing the equivalent of a degree on it. Looking at Bearden, Miles Mathis, and Eric Dollard. I don't know Eric Dollard. Miles Mathis has got 2 very good books on it. I've got one of the books and I've tried to read it, but again, 5 kids, trimming trees. It's a kind of book I need to sit down and read, and I haven't had the chance. Cooper Chauvin says RPG report will be delivered once it happens. The players have conflicting schedules at the moment. I'm trying to work it out. Go for it. Even if you just play, with one or two guys or whatever, it's worth it. Cordell says mathematics is just a way to prove something on paper. Exactly. Sam Werb says understand the logic. Thank you. Yes, good. And keep in mind that there are Russian astronomers that understand the logic, and I can follow the Russian guys. I can follow the Russian astronomers, no problem. The Western guys with all the maths, some of the maths is way beyond me. But the thing is, if you can do the logic, you don't need the maths. And in fact, the Russian astronomers are way ahead of the Western guys, but they'll ask help from the Western guys to prove the point, because the Western guys sort of dominate, kind of like the way they dominate the whole Ukraine thing, in theory. It's not going so well for them, so maybe that will change. But, the thing is, if you have access to, if you can do the maths that proves the logic, doesn't mean that you can do the logic. And I would rather be one of the guys that can do the logic rather than maths, because usually the guys that can do the maths are kind of like blinkered autists that can only see things in that way. And they need the imagination and the sort of feeling of the Russian version of the astronomers that then say, look, this should work, and this is like this. Can you prove it mathematically? And then that's where the Western guy comes in to like double check it. One of the reasons that these machines that the French created wasn't reproduced, or what they say, I think there was other reasons as well, but one of the reasons because they couldn't figure out a theory for it. So you had this magical machine that fixed people, but it's like, yeah, but why does it work? And like nobody could really figure it out. But it worked. Who cares, right? No, let's all hide it now. So, yeah. Joe C says, have you checked out what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah? Seems to be a lot of electromagnetic activity, strange radiation bursts coupled with UAP activity. I'm guessing unidentified aerial phenomenon activity. No, I don't know anything much about Skinwalker Ranch. I've heard the name, but I can't place it right now. No, I don't know anything about that. Sylvester Rep, exactly. Most science has followed engineering, tinkering historically. Real science. That's why my blog has got that 18th century sort of Baroque look, because it's still one of the real scientists. Sam Webb, precisely. My 8th grade science teacher brought up the ether one day only to dismiss it and wouldn't let us ask questions about it. You see, that guy dares call himself a teacher. What a moron. Merck says, is boxing an okay base to branch off into Systema with? How much of Systema can I self-learn? I have your book, by the way. You can learn a lot of it. If you have the book and you apply the lessons in the book, ask Sylvester. Sylvester, if you're still listening, confirm what I'm saying, or deny it if I'm lying. Sylvester is practicing jiu-jitsu, and he's got my book, and he's read it, and he's applied some of the lessons, and it's improved his jiu-jitsu immeasurably. I believe to the extent that your classmates have noticed a difference and haven't really understood where it comes from. Boxing is great. Boxing is very, very effective. If you train boxing properly, I would say that most martial artists would be in trouble with a good boxer. Yes, it's true that the boxer doesn't use, locks and throws and doesn't know how to ground fight and that sort of thing. But, the thing is, most fights will start, and usually kind of, not always, but like if you know how to strike, I don't want to go to the ground in any fight, in any kind of street fight. I don't want to end up on the ground, because there's going to be friends, there's going to be other people, you're going to get your head kicked in. And all the fights I've had, I've tried to knock the guy up, and I've bashed people or whatever. It's like, you want to fuck him up as quickly as possible and, put him on the ground. But I don't want to be wrestling on the ground, rolling around with those other people around. And if you're a good striker, that's it. If it's, getting caught by surprise or whatever, it's going to be very difficult, even for an MMA guy or whatever, to grab me physically without me having landed 2 or 3 things on him first. And any one of the things that I can land on people, you're going to feel it. I don't care who you are. If I land a proper blow on you, you're not going to be particularly happy. And if I land it in the correct place where I want to land it, you're going to be hurt. Just once, you're going to be hurt. If I land 2 or 3, you know, I've had like street fights where the guy was trying to literally kill me, and it didn't go well for the other guy. So, you know, it's striking is very, very important. And boxers have got a bam, 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 bam. You know, the difficult thing you're going to get with boxing is you're going to be used to training with gloves on. And when you actually punch a human being, you know, flesh and bone, flesh and flesh, it's quite easy to break your hand. I've broken my hand on somebody's face before. They weren't particularly happy, by the way, when I was done, but I broke the little bone. You know, I just landed a bit wrong, and I broke this bone on this hand. And if you hit on top of the head, you will break your hand. You know, if a guy like ducks and he knows what he's doing, and you hit him right here, maybe you'll knock him out if you're strong enough, but you'll probably break your hand if you hit the. And I've got like headbutts are, you know, are a big thing. They're useful, so you can learn a lot. And look, doing something is better than doing nothing. If what you've got is a good boxing gym near you, go to boxing. And you know what, Systema. If you do Systema anyway, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and do a karate class and a jiu-jitsu class and a judo class and a boxing class. Go. The whole point of Systema is like learn, do all sorts of things. When I did karate for years before I did Systema. Then I did Systema for a few months. Then I went to a very high level karate class, and I was like, after that class, I could hardly move my body, because in karate everything is hard, and I knew to do that. I've done that for decades. Then I went to do Systema, and everything is soft and smooth and floppy. Then I went to do a hardcore karate class where I was trying to like do the karate movement using Systema principles. So I was trying to be totally relaxed, but the old 2 decades of training was like coming in and like, so like my body was almost fighting itself. And by one class, and all it was just katas. That's all we did. We did not kata, just up and down combinations. That's all we did. It was an hour and a half of combination. There was no fighting, no sparring. And the next day, I think even my butthole was like bruised, you know, internally, because it was like my whole body had been like fighting itself, you know, 2 decades of like hardcore tack, snappy training, and now like going all soft and loose and movement, and the two things trying to fight each other, because unconsciously I've still got a lot of that old training in there, but now I've been doing something that's been sort of rubbing that out, and it's like, you know, so you can do any martial art, and you can tie it into Systema. And if you read the principles in the book and you apply them, you can apply them from the beginning. It's like a huge step forward. You know, it's like when I started doing karate, my dad told me never like let go of your kick completely, because you'll injure your knee. I'm one of the few people that did karate for like 3 decades at least, and I didn't have a knee injury. I didn't have a knee operation. There's very few people who do karate for Westerners, because the Japanese have got a slightly different way their joint work, their knee joint. And but Westerners that do karate for 30 years, almost all of them have some kind of knee problems or knee injuries or knee surgeries, a lot of them. I didn't, because my dad gave me that one little hint when I was a kid. And, you know, Systema gives you so many more, like in that book, I've tried to really define the principle in a way that makes it useful for you. So Sylvester says, hi Merg, yeah, I applied the principles of Systema during jiu-jitsu class, and it definitely helped. Staying relaxed, and most important, using structure to achieve techniques instead of strength. Yes. Hacken Engman, do you think that you have been in more street fights being a martial arts practitioner compared to should you never have trained martial arts? Oh, absolutely not, no. I'd say the other way around. Because I was trained in martial arts, I managed to avoid a lot of fights. And, you know, if I hadn't been, my own ego or insecurity or pissed offness would have like got me to like, oh, I can't let this guy talk shit to me or whatever, you know. No, I think because of martial arts, I've managed to avoid a lot of fights, and I've even stopped fights between other people that I knew nothing of, because I was so comfortable and relaxed in the situation that I just got in between, you know. Like I stopped a fight on the tube once by reading my newspaper. I know it sounds funny, but like I came in and there was this like what I'd call your typical low-class British, white British, you know, dirty packy or whatever, you know. And he was having a go at this little Indian guy for no reason. Okay, and what had happened, because then it sort of came out later in the whole thing, but what had happened is like the little Indian guy was sort of standing in the doorway when this guy climbed in and said, "Oh, move," and the little Indian guy didn't get out of the way fast enough or whatever, in a packed tube, right? And so this like British guy that looked like he's still recovering from a few beers from the night before started like, "Yo, whoa, I'm gonna fuck you up," and you know, he was basically harassing this guy who was like a foot shorter than him, a thin little Indian dude in a suit. And this guy was like obviously some kind of tradesman or whatever, you know, still in his splattered uniform. And he was like, ugh. And I walked on and I saw this happening. I could see the Indian guy was like terrified, you know. He was like, and you could tell that that little Indian dude wasn't the kind of guy that, you know, had a go at this random guy or swore at him or did anything like on purpose. You know, it was clearly he was just looking for a fight. And I just thought, oh, so what, you know, and I saw this, and I was like, what, I just thought, what happened? You know, I tell the white, what happened, dude? Are you okay? Are you all right? Are you feeling well? And it like scrambles his brain. Like, it's like, what? Yeah, you know, we'll sort it out. We'll sort it out. I'm like, oh, okay, good. I just opened my newspaper between them, right? Now it's a packed train, so it's like, I just opened my newspaper right between them. And I didn't even fake reading the newspaper. I actually started reading the article because I'm so, you know, I've been doing Systema for a while. I was teaching it, I think, at the time. And I was like, yeah, this guy can try and take a liberty. Let him. I was almost like, I hope he kind of does. I hope he kind of tries to throw a punch at me while I'm reading my newspaper. Because it would just automatically come out. He would have been wrecked. Actually, I wouldn't have wrecked him. I would have just like, put him down and like not even hurt him. But so now he's like, he started a fight with this guy because he was in his way or whatever. Now I've opened a newspaper between them and he can't get to the guy without like crossing in front of me or moving my newspaper out the way, which I'm not going to have that happen, right? I've just talked to you, mate, you okay, mate? And now I've opened the newspaper, so you're my mate, right? You're not going to touch my newspaper while I'm reading it. It's all psychological, right? But I didn't have to think about this, it just came out. I'm like, yeah, just reading my newspaper. Until the next stop when the little Indian guy went out of the train and like called one of the you know, community police or whatever. Oh, this guy's harassing me, you know. And so he got away and whatever. And they called this guy off the train. So like, why are you harassing the guy? So they called him off. And you know, I don't know what happened then. But that was just like, in the old days, I would have been like, oh, this is most unfair. What are you doing? Why aren't you harassing this man? You know. And even if I'd just done karate, there would have been a fight. There would have been a broken nose, blood somewhere. I probably would have been arrested because, oh, why did you get involved? You know. But when the thing is, you know, when you're confident, like now, if some guy, you know, I've had an occurrence where I was in a sauna, the swimming pool or something, and like I wasn't even listening. There was like 3 big black guys or whatever, like sitting behind me, and like I turned around just to look who's in the room, and then like it clicked a bit later that one of them said like something like, "Oh, what are you looking at? I'll slap you in the face, bitch," or something like that. But they were kind of like talking their Ebonics version, whatever, to each other, and I was like, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't like worried at all. And I'm like, I think they're talking to me, and I'm like, huh. In the old days, it would have been like, oh, just because you think there's 3 of you and you're big guys, and you think I'm scared, I'm gonna. And I was just like, huh, look at that. Didn't even faze me, you know. And you know, if it needed to get to a fight, whatever, you know, I don't know if I would have won or not. It doesn't matter, right? The point is like, what, are you gonna get into a fist fight because of some fucking idiot like saying some stupid shit? To me, there was nobody else there. He didn't like say anything to my wife or whatever. But I was there with my, well, we weren't married then, but like, you know, and her kid and stuff. And there was other kids, you know, it's like a public swimming pool with his kids, and there was like some water kind of game thing. Do I really need to get into a fucking fist fight with 3 guys and splash their brains all over the place? And, you know, what for? For what? Because they're like arrogant pricks that are so unhappy with their own lives, they got to say some shit. And to be honest, I wasn't 100% sure they were like even talking about me, or maybe they were saying to each other, but it's like I got the vibe that it's like, yeah, they're, you know, trying to say something because whatever, I got the face I have. Maybe they thought I was some neo-Nazi guy because I got no hair. I don't know what the thing was, but it didn't keep me up nights, put it that way. I did think about it when I saw them in the parking lot, you know, when I left and I saw the 3 of them in the parking lot walking out, and I thought, if I had been on my own, I don't know, there's still maybe enough of an ego there that I said, oh, you three fucking idiots, were you talking shit to me, or were you just talking shit in general? Because I want to know. I'm curious. I might have, but again, I had a girl in the car and her kid and all that. It's unnecessary. So absolutely, without shadow of a doubt, the fact that I did martial arts for years and years and years has definitely got me into less fights than I would have been if I hadn't done that. How can that is what most martial artists practitioners say. So I'm happy with that answer. Less fights. Yeah. Look, I'm from Scandinavia myself. I lived abroad for approximately 20 years, including the UK, and I find the UK quite violent. Is that your experience as well? I know what you mean, but I lived in South Africa where, saying hello to somebody is kind of just as common as elbowing them in the face. So compared to South Africa, I found the UK an absolute cakewalk. I remember when I first arrived, I was living in the southeast end area of London because a friend of mine was giving up his flat, and we managed to make a deal with the landlord so that he would like pass it on to me. And I just managed to get that flat, which was, it was cheap at the time, but it was very expensive for me because I was coming from South Africa where it was like 20 to 1 the exchange rate. I used to walk to like Oxford Street from there because near Elephant and Castle, because I didn't want to spend the £1 for the bus because that was like 20 rand, So, and then I started working, and people asked, "Oh, where do you live?" And I said to them, and they were like, "Oh my God, why are you living there?" They made it sound like I was living in Beirut, during the wars. I was like, "Oh, it's not that bad." It's like, "No, but there's a," and I don't know if it was a race thing or I genuinely, I don't know. It's like, "Oh, there's all sorts of scumbags there, there's violence and there's stabbings." And I was like, I used to walk through the little parks like late at night to come to the apartment where I was in the hope of meeting a mugger so that I could train a bit, because I was working all the time. I started training in the Systema thing, and I want to check it out, But I never got mugged. And my method of measurement for like how violent the UK was like, when people telling me that, I was like, these guys are like saying it's a really bad area. But in Cape Town, I used to be in a pretty decent area. It wasn't like the most expensive or the most luxurious area by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't a dump. And when I went to sleep where I was, you'd hear gunshots, throughout the night. It'd be like, bang, bang, bang. Oh, it's not so close. You'd sort of like, yeah, it's not under my house. It's not near my apartment. It's like a couple of streets down, whatever. And you just go back to sleep. And I said, and my method of measurement was like, I don't know what these guys are talking about. When I go to sleep here, no gunshots. Not even one since I've been here. I haven't even heard one gunshot. It's like, I don't know. It's kind of cool, It's pretty relaxed to me. And yes, I know what you mean, because they get violent when they're drunk in the pubs, and it's usually groups. That's the thing I hate. It's never like a one-on-one thing, It's more like a bunch of idiots, and then they'll all jump on one random guy or whatever. It's very gang type shit, which I hate. But we had a funny incident because like the guy that was, I was teaching Systema, and then this guy walked in, and I looked at him and I was like, "Do you want to take the class over?" And he was like, "Why?" I'm like, "Well, because there's no reason for me to talk if you're in this class." But I didn't know who he was. I just could tell. And he was like, "Oh, okay." And then we started talking. We became very good friends. And so this guy had a pub. He took over a pub. I mean, this guy's even worse at business. As a businessman, he's a fucking train smash. Like I am at marketing, basically. He's just fucking useless as a businessman. But as far as Systema goes, it's like, he's the guy who trained him used to train the KGB assassins for the KGB, okay? No lie, no word of a lie. He used to train the top KGB wet work people, and this guy got trained by them. And when he came over to the UK, one of the Russian guys that was teaching Systema goes, I checked with his teacher, like who's like this guy, and I kind of knew of him. I hadn't trained with the guy who trained this guy, but yeah. And I asked him, "So how is it?" And he said, his answer was, "Well, if you have enough bullets, it is possible to kill Uldis. It is possible. But he will never be defeated. Which is a very Russian thing. Like, you know, yeah, you can kill him, but you won't defeat him. And I know exactly what he means. And when I trained with this guy, like I trained with Vadim Dobrin is like a master. He's like, you know, when you train with knives or whatever, like with Vadim, if I used all my ability and I was really trying to like stab him, let's say, you know, for whatever reason, I don't know, we got switched minds or something, and for whatever reason I was trying to kill Vadim with a knife, I might be able to catch his t-shirt and I might cut Vadim's t-shirt open, but it would kill me very neatly. There probably would be no blood and I would just be a dead body on the floor. With all this, I'd be able to cut all this. I'd actually cut him. There would be some blood. Yes! And then he would kill me. Very messily, and it would be a crumpled little dead body. Not as neat as Vadim's body. But the thing is, Uldis will sacrifice himself a little bit just to make sure that there's absolutely no chance I survive. With Vadim, I might escape for a few seconds. With Uldis, done. So that's kind of the guy, you know, he was, and he got this pub, and I can't remember what it was, somebody's birthday or whatever. So all the Systema guys were in this guy's pub now, including with my sister at the time. We were all there, all having a drink, and in comes this group, and this pub was in a known shitty area that, like, it was the pub of the thugs of the area. And then when he took it over, these guys tried it, and Uldis had a few confrontations with these guys, and like he helped one of them out the door, like by, you know, hitting his head against the post and throwing him out or whatever. So he always had shit. But it's like we were now all this pub was filled with Systema guys, and about 5 or 6 people came in and started trying to cause shit. And we all saw it, you know, and we're all like, heh. And like one of these guys says, "Oh, I'll play pool with you," and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I'll play pool with you." And I can tell they're looking for shit, you know. And one of them sneaks up behind me with a bottle in his hand, but I can see him, right? And I'm playing stupid. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll play pool with you." I've now got a pool cue. The guy's giving me a pool cue. He's got a pool cue, and his mate's behind me with his bottle, trying to sneak up on me and clock me with the bottle because they raised their voice or they'd done something. And I'm like, "Hey, fucking idiots, shut up!" To all of them, right? So now they were like kind of wolf packing. But my sister didn't figure out that I knew what was going on. So she like saw the guy with the bottle, snuck up behind him and like, whoop, pulled the bottle away from him and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, no, give him his bottle. Let him have the bottle. You know, I was like, I was just about to like, "What are you doing? Don't get involved." You know, I said, "I just sit down, sis." Cool. It's like 20 guys from Systema. You have these poor fucking idiots. And it's like, they started something and then they sort of realized when one of them like tried something with Uldis, and Uldis just held this guy, just grabbed his arms and just held him and like was waiting for the headbutt. And I was like, Uldis, just fucking do him, you know, just like teach him a fucking lesson. And you've got 20 witnesses here that he slipped and fell. You know what I mean? Like, fuck him. But Uldis is such a nice guy that he was like, he's just drunk, stupid fool. He has an unfortunate life, you know, I just hold his hands and then he can go away. And I just chased them away nicely without, no one was injured, no one was like a wreck. And that's, you know, there's a whole fucking pub of like martial artists that any one of them could have taken out 2, 3, 4 of these guys without breaking a sweat. And all we're doing, we're kind of looking at them going, is he gonna go for it? And I was the meanest one because, to be honest, I played pool with this guy because I wanted to see like, okay, let's see 3, 4, 5 of them, you know, let's see how many I can take out with a pool cue before they even realize what's going on. And they didn't go for it because they kind of figured out, oops, they're outmatched. So I know what you mean, but in compared to the places I've been, I don't find the UK violent at all. But I know what you mean. It can get nasty and whatever. The only time I came across, I used to walk back at night through all the dodgy areas to try and find something happening, you know. There are 2 things that happened. One was, once I was walking when I wasn't looking for shit, and like these kids, like 4 or 5 kids, one of them threw a bottle at me and hit my backpack. I was coming back from work, and I was like, turn around and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" So I walked up to them, and I gave them shit, you know, because I wanted them to like react. And I was thinking one of them raises his hands. Because the smallest guy was probably like 10, but the oldest guy was like maybe 18, 20. And I was like, you know, there's 4 of you. I don't give a shit. I will bitch slap you into next week. But they didn't react at all. They were like, and I said, "No, fuck you," and I gave them a lot of shit, and then I walked away. And thank God it went that way, because there's actually cameras all over there. And but then as I walked away, I could hear them. They like ran off and they called all their mates, and I was like, "No, I'm not gonna run. Fuck them." I was walking along the riverfront, which was where my house was, and by the time I got to the front gate of the complex where my apartment was, there was 25 of these guys, some of them on bicycles and whatever, and some of them were like 18, 20. And they all got up to me, and I thought, okay, I just managed to get up to the little gate, open the little gate. So there was like 2 columns, and then there was like a walk-through gate. You know, there's the big gate for the cars, and then there was just a walk-through gate that, like, you know, the people gate. So it was like a doorway, basically. And I opened that, and I stood in the doorway. So it's not open behind me, and I've got the 2 columns behind me. And I just stood there. I said, yeah, come. And they were like swearing and saying, "Oh, we're going to fuck you up, this, that, and oh, come away from there. You know, there's cameras." Like, no, boys, look around. No cameras. No cameras in this corner. Come on, let's go. There's 20 of you. Come on. Because now I'm in a doorway. They can only come maximum 2, 3 at a time. And 25 of them, 2, 3 at a time, it would have been like Enter the Dragon. Wow, wow, wow. I don't care if they were young or whatever. Some of them would have had knives. They had bottles and stuff. It would have been 25 laid out guys. And they weren't stupid. They didn't come in. And, you know, I stayed there swearing at them while they're swearing at me for a bit. I'm like, "Oh, you're a bunch of fucking coward, chicken shit assholes. You know, you're doing nothing. I'm one guy. Come on." They wouldn't. And so eventually I just went in and closed the gate. And then they threw a bottle at me and whatever. And I caught the bottle and I threw it back at him and I missed his head by like this much. That was it. So that was one time. But you see what I mean? Now, if I had been outside, I would have put my back to the walkway where the river was. But, you know, there you could still get 4 or 5 guys attacking you. And like in Systema, we did train mass attacks. But the thing is, if you're getting 4 or 5 guys and they're like 15, 18, 16, 20, 22, 23, 19, and they've got knives, then you're in trouble. Doesn't matter who you are, because you're going to get stabbed. In that situation, I wouldn't have been trying to lay people out. I would have been throwing them over the side and whatever. So I don't know how I would have gone, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out, because there would have been bodies, whether mine, theirs, or both, who knows. So that was really the only situation that was a bit hairy. And another time I was walking home and I saw this couple walking a dog getting harassed by like 4 people. There was a car stopped in the ring and 3, 4 guys were like around them like, "Ugh," and they started to like say something to the girl and the guy. And I saw them across the road and I thought, "Oh, it's my chance." I didn't want to run because I'd set them off. So I just started walking quickly and like just looking, you know, like I'm not really paying attention to what's going on. But then as I got close enough, I started to like cross the road to like get to their side. The guy in the car saw me and he's like, "Hey!" And then the 3, 4 guys, they all turned around. They saw me coming. And I thought, okay, now they know I'm coming. I lost the element of surprise. But, you know, I can train properly now. They all ran into the car and ran off. I was like, yeah. So, yeah, it was not... I can't say that it's... I found it particularly dangerous, put it that way. Wooly says, "Good evening." Hakan says, "Yes, SA is another level. Both being there and worked for many years with South Africans who have emigrated to Europe, i.e. hard personal stories, usually over a couple of years." Yeah. Look, you know, most of the people I know have been hijacked at some point. You know, it's like, it's bad there. And Sam says, "About 30 Boers are chain migrating their families to work and live in a small rural village here. I think it's a good thing, and it parallels your Italian Kurganet. Thus it can be done." Yeah, look, in Oranje, you know, when the ANC took over, like a bunch of Afrikaners, like in the middle of the Karoo, in the middle of nowhere, it's like, there's nothing there. It's like a desert with like metal tin roofs. They started this place called Oranje, and I thought, good, let them all go there, build a wall, and keep them in there. Because, you know, the average Afrikaner is not somebody I have a lot of respect for, generally speaking. And, you know, there's obviously always exceptions. You know, there's guys that I get on with, but as a people, I didn't find them particularly great. And I thought, oh, well, just dumb bunch of racist South Africans, screw them. It's now 20-something years later, and they did a little, I think I may have blogged about it, I don't remember. They did a little expose on it, sort of thing. And it's a great little town with, you know, they've got trees and everything. And there's like black guys now saying, oh, but you can't have like a white only community, you know. And but the thing is, they tried to like wipe them out, and they hired this lawyer that was like, no, South Africa's constitution allows for the minority groups of whatever, like, because you've got 11 official languages, so there are some minority groups of black tribes like Tsongas or whatever. They're not as numerous as the Xhosa or the Zulu, but they have a right to their culture and whatever. But so are the Afrikaners. They're a minority group, and they've got a right to their culture and ways and whatever. And that's what they do. And they don't hire any, I don't think any, they don't hire like black people permanently or whatever, like for work or something like that. And people leave their doors open. There's no crime. Everybody's armed, you know, because you can in South Africa. So I've got to take my hat off to them. They've created a little community that works for them. They have little signs. Now, as I said, I'm no fan of Afrikaners, but they've got signs saying, look, we speak Afrikaans here, we can speak English, but keep in mind that this is our culture and whatever. And if I were ever to visit Oranje, you know, for whatever reason, I would respect the rules. You know, I would be like, okay, it's an Afrikaner thing, and if I'm here, I'm going to behave by the rules that you have. Just like if I decided to go to Saudi Arabia for whatever, you know, if I got a tumor in my brain or something, I would respect the rules, just like I expect people to respect the rules when they come into my country or my place or my house. I see nothing wrong with that. You know, that is true diversity. So, yeah. Willie Ram says, most street kids are big talkers who won't do anything unless it's 5-1. Yeah, even 25-1, they didn't do shit. So, yeah, that's how it is. Okay, guys, I'll be going for nearly 2 hours, which is a bit more than I thought. I hope you found the anti-gravity stuff a little bit interesting. I posted that link, but I'm probably going to do another blog post. I think the latest blog post I did on the Maxwell stuff is pretty good. So it hopes you gives you a little bit of inspiration for those of you who want to tinker and experiment with stuff. But if you've got any questions, since there's 20 of you, please shoot them now. I tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go downstairs and get myself a drink of water, which gives you guys a few minutes to think up of any questions on any topics, and I'll come back. Okay. And here I am. Oh, and don't forget, feel free to sponsor some of our trees. There are 50 of them are up on the blog. If you just go to gfilotto.com, you've got the link in the video description. So, oh, it's not nighttime yet, Wally. I'll be a little while before I go to sleep. But yeah, thank you. Oh, and otherwise, I'm off to on the gasifier. Just a last quick note. The weather's just been absolutely crap, and I've had to do the pruning, which is important because it has to happen by a certain deadline. But I have carried on experimenting with it. I am going to carry on with experimenting with it more. I will get the thing done at some point, but I need to fill in the filter with more stuff and readapt the blower. I've done one more of the videos. I've got to edit the videos and whatever for the other ones, and also they're not that interesting because they're failed versions. So I'm doing the videos with the failed versions just so you know what not to do. But I'm thinking at this stage I'm pretty close, hopefully, to having everything finished. So I'm going to keep going until I have everything finished, and then I'll release all the videos and the PDFs and everything all at once. Hakan says, I like the 25-1 story. Sounded like the movie 300. Well, to be fair, it wasn't really. I mean, before Systema, I would have been worried even in the doorway. After Systema, nah, I could take on those guys now, and this was, when was this? This was December of 2015. I probably would have got away with it too, because the next day I was leaving for overseas for a year for work. So what was that? That's 2003. Well, that's 7 years ago. So I was 7 years ago, 45, 46, something like that. I'm now 53, and I've got a couple of injuries now from doing stupid things on the farm. I would take on those 25 guys now. If you put me between two big pillars, face brick pillars about this thick, so they can't get around to me, even though it was like a fence there. But pillar that way, doorway in the middle, I would take on those 25 guys now. I would take on those 25 guys now, even if they're like 7 years older, so they're all adults. I'll be okay with it. I might not come out as well if they're all adults, especially if they had knives and stuff like that. But if the first guy doesn't get lucky with a knife, I'll have his knife, and then the other guys have got a bigger problem. So, and if we're talking no knives, just like punches, kicks, and stuff like that, yeah, in a doorway, dude, if you don't have a gun or throwing things at me from a distance or whatever, at my current, not completely trained or I'm certainly not the fittest I've ever been in my life, I'll be fine. Why was my wife the other day asked me that? I can't remember why it came up, but she said something like, so, do you reckon you could still take a guy out? I was like, what guy? I mean, what are you talking about? If you're talking about a highly trained, like 31-year-old with peak fitness that's super fat, that's really good at his martial art, I can get unlucky, sure, maybe he'll take me out, maybe not. But if it's one guy, even if he's like well trained, he might knock me out first punch. Who knows? I don't know. I haven't been in that situation for a while, but it's not going to be if he doesn't, it's not going to be an easy ride for him. It's not going to be a walk in the park thing. And if it's like a normal fit guy, but who's not like highly trained, who's just like an average martial artist or whatever, yeah, fuck it. I'm not worried at all. Which again doesn't mean you can't, slip, hit your head and die before you even get hit. Shit happens. But as a general rule, your average mid-20s random thug that I'm going to meet in the street, or even a couple of them, if we're talking no weapons, right? And if they do have a knife or something, then it's going to be dangerous for them, because I'm at an age where I'm not going to try and mess around too much. I'm just going to try and take you out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And if you've got a weapon on you, and that means you die, then you die, I'm not going to worry about it. I'll worry about the court case and all that shit later. So, Mark says, any writing advice you can give a complete beginner? I have some stories I want to write. I'll give you the very best advice that was given to me when I'd written my first book. One of my karate teachers was an accomplished writer of true crime. He's got he had then about 25, 30 books out. English guy, very nice man. And the bit of advice he gave me is like, oh, you've written a book, that's awesome, you're so young. Here's one bit of advice. Don't stop writing. That's it. All you've got to do if you want to become a writer is keep writing. And keep in mind that any book that you write, by the time you've finished it and actually got it to the point where it's good enough to be, published and whatever, you've rewritten that book 3 or 4 times. So, and honestly, genuinely, it's the best advice that anybody could have given me. And I tried to keep up doing that, but I didn't manage for many years because, again, my life was so moved around. I didn't get a chance to finish. I've got, I don't know, probably a dozen half-written books in my computers somewhere. And some of them I've since grown out of wanting to write that story or whatever. But that doesn't apply to the Overlords of Mars. I'm still going to finish that series. But I've had ideas of books in my head for years. Even the Overlords of Mars, I had that book in my head for almost 10 years before I actually got to write it. And I've got the whole series of Overlords of Mars. It's all in my head. I know exactly where it's going and everything. But if you want to be a writer, write. That's it. That is honestly, genuinely the best advice ever. Just keep writing. And of course, I don't know what your level of ability is with writing, but if you want to be a good writer, you got to read. You got to read a lot. Read and read and read and read, and then read some more. The more you read, the better writer you become. That's basically it. Okay, if there's no more questions, that's it. We're 2 hours exactly. Thank you all very much. God bless you. And remember to sponsor a tree. Make it the Valley of the Saints. Thank you very much and have a good night.